Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Allison Bray on the podcast. She's coming to us from Ohio. We had another Ohioan on the podcast. I mean, it is sort of the home of bodybuilding for a lot of people. I mean, there's so much there's so much bodybuilding community in Ohio. I mean, it's ridiculous. But yeah, she's on here to share her health and fitness journey. And yeah, just discuss all things about it. And, most importantly, she's our current guest. Allison, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about my fitness journey and, share with the community.
Well, I love to break the ice with this question every single time I start off. What's the weather like today?
Actually, today it was in the 50s, but you know what? We're in Ohio, so tomorrow it'll be in the 20s. So, it's winter. So, but we complain about that all year round because it can be winter, like in the course of 24 hours, have all four seasons.
I mean, like Minnesota is like that in the fall, but in the winter it's just cold and it's going to be cold and nothing's going to change it. And it's
Yeah,
just
it's actually 55 still right now, and it's 7:30 at night. So, yeah.
subtract about 50 degrees and you're where I'm at right now. So, there's that. I mean, we just had like that, we set a lot of records here in Minnesota. Like we just had that soccer game here where it was like -5 at kickoff or whatever. So it's the coldest
Oh,
soccer game
wow.
ever played or something like. I'm not a soccer fan. I think it's the world's dumbest
Yeah, I'm
sport.
not either.
Hey, at least we set records that way because yeah. I mean, that's the only positive thing is that if you look at like all the coldest games on record, I think it's like 7 out of the 10 in North America have occurred in Minnesota. So, but before we get into all that, because I don't want to. I'm getting cold just talking about that right now, basically. So I don't want to do that. So, Allison, to start things off, why don't you just give us your backstory on what inspired and motivated you to take on this lifestyle and become a bodybuilder?
Gosh. So I started lifting back when I was in high school. I ran track, and I'll say I kind of pseudo ran track because I really did the field. I did shot put, and then if I went to a small high school, and so they needed a sprinter, and I stepped in as a sprint team person, but I primarily did shot put, and so that's kind of where I got my first exposure to the lifting. Hitting the gym. Needed strong legs for shot put, and so and then went on to college and I dabbled in it here and there. And actually in college, I played hockey at Ohio State. This was back in the early 90s. So, it was a little different. It was club, but we represented the university and, traveled around doing that for like 2.5 years. So had a lot of fun with that. Um,
What position were you?
I was defense,
Okay.
defense. Yeah. Protect the goal, protect the line.
I mean, I never played hockey, but I wish I could. But I'm 6'3", so I would have had to have been defenseman. Basically, that's like
Yes, I'm 5'11", so I definitely, work that to my advantage.
I love that we have another tall person on the podcast as well because that to me, I'm sorry, but some of these guests that I have on there like 5 feet tall, it's like you putting on muscle versus me putting on muscle. It's not even the
It
same
is.
realm. Yeah.
It is very challenging. Yes, we could talk about that later, but it's definitely a disadvantage. Yes, in bodybuilding, in the bodybuilding sport. So, but I was, and then, gosh, I like I said, I've always lifted, was always pretty active. Can't say that I was always very fit, and a lot of it has to do with diet and lifestyle and all of that good stuff. But then it was like 2010, actually, was kind of when I started working out with a trainer, and she competed in figure and kind of, was exposed to it. And I actually had gone to the Arnold Classic several, kind of, which takes place here in Columbus, Ohio. And so I had seen it and I had, was familiar with it. But, in terms of contemplating myself competing, I was like, oh, I don't think I could do that. But really just through, her encouragement and then just kind of, I wasn't real happy with myself. And I don't know how much some of your other guests kind of, go into that, but, you kind of get to a point where I need a goal. I want to have a goal to work towards. And if that's to compete in a show and, I needed something concrete like that to motivate me. So then let's say that was in 2010. So I competed my first time in 2012, just here in a local show in, Columbus. And, I actually got second. But then and then I did another one that was local as well. And then I got like ninth place. And so, which was a little bit of a downer, right? It's kind of like you go from the super high to the super low. And I was like, man, I was, but what you come to find out in these competitions is, you can be as built up and your best that you're bringing, but it's all in who else shows up too. So, you may have been the best at the last show, but that was based on who else was there. And then you go to this other show, there's a different, caliber of, competitors and everything. So, it's just, it's very, eye opening in terms of that. So, um, anyhow, so that's where it got started. Like I said, just, and then I took some time off, just life and expenses and things like that too. And then really just kind of again wanted a goal to kind of work towards. And then the pandemic hit. But actually, I was already working towards doing a show in 2020. Um, when everything closed down and all of that, and then I ended up training a lot at home, but I still then went on to compete in the fall of 2020 and then went on to get my pro card that same year.
Wow, that is awesome. And I mean, on top of what you were saying too about, I have found I've not had one case on this podcast where a guest has said everything was going perfect in my life and then I decided to become a bodybuilder. There's always something that's lacking then that you choose this. I mean, this is not a sport that like if you're really just like hitting if you're really just hitting blackjack all the time in life, you're not going to say like I want to become a bodybuilder. But again, it's always, and that's why I love asking the backstory, because everyone always has that story of why they chose to do this lifestyle, because it's not a normal lifestyle. It's not something that, a lot of like, especially people in my generation who want everything now and they want it yesterday. This is not a lifestyle
Hmm.
that you can get into and expect that. And again, if that does happen to you, give me your number and I will spend my entire life savings to train with you then for, because that is the secret that everyone's looking for. But
Right.
I mean, there's so many misconceptions also about this sport, especially in the general public. Was there any reservations that you had about pursuing this sort of lifestyle, or was it one of those things where you just want to dive right in and see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, there's all for me. I mean, there was that self doubt, like just getting up on stage, making yourself very vulnerable. You're putting yourself out there, and you're like, how are you going to do? How and of course, everybody. Don't get me wrong. We want to win. But there can only be one winner, And so I've always tried to be like, you know what? I'll just be happy if I get top five, even if I place maybe top 10. I try. Some people may be like, well, that's kind of self defeating or whatever. But I'm like, I'm being realistic. I'm like, I just like to, not key myself up too high and then have really be, kind of, I guess, let down if I don't do that well. Um, but, so like I said, and then, when you do well and then you don't do well, which I've kind of had that epiphany in this last year, because I got my pro card in 2020, which that was a phenomenal experience, in Orlando, and then I competed this past year in 2021 in two pro shows. First pro, and that's stepping on an entirely different stage. I mean, I was on the stage with, some of my idols, Natalia and Emily and Amy. And I mean, just kind of, I was just like, ah, but, and then you know, and then my humble, or, I got third call outs, so, I went from that extreme high of getting my pro card, which that's a phenomenal, thing to achieve. But then now I'm like, okay, I'm kind of like, okay, you've got some work to do, girl. I'm like, which, some people come out hitting hard and, hitting, in the top five or, in their first pro show. Great. I think for the majority of us though, we're not quite there yet, and that's okay. I'm, going to take some time and work on what I need to, and, I'll get there next year.
Were you kind of as shocked as a lot of people are? Like we talked about this before, but like stepping on the stage, like you said, with the people that you looked up to, and then realizing how much taller you are than them.
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it is. Yeah. I mean, because of course, on stage you see pictures. It's always hard to gauge. But then I'm kind of like, I look across and I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of like scanning over the tops of their heads.
I've always been the joke. If I ever went to one of these shows, I could bounce most of my guests like a basketball, basically, if I wanted to. So yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, those cameras and those photos. I mean, it's like I don't even know what I would look like then in those things. Then if they're making all these other people look so much taller. But I mean, this is also so much more of a mental sport than it is a physical sport, and a lot of people don't understand that because they'll just notice the physical changes and say, wow, Ellison, you look great, but they don't realize the mental change that has happened as well, and that's 100 times more important than anything you can change physically. What has this whole journey been like for you mentally?
Yeah, it's you kind of have to tackle it. At least how my motto is kind of like, win the day, right? It's kind of like every day you try to like do something better or to improve. I mean, you may have had a crappy day yesterday, but it's more like, okay, today's a fresh start. You can't, and as long as you're making small improvements, you'll get to your goal. I mean, the bigger improvements you make, obviously, faster you're going to get there. But and recognizing that, like I said, you're going to have off days where, you know what, I went over my macros, or I didn't feel like going to the gym. But I mean, that's a big thing for me, is just kind of pushing through it and mentally just kind of that commitment. For me, sometimes getting there is the hardest part. Once I'm there, it's like, headphones in, I'm just, I'm ready to go. And it is, for people who ask, about, well, how do you continue to do it? I'm like, you have to tell yourself, make yourself a priority, and treat it like it's an appointment. Like, you have this appointment every day, whether it's right after work, 6 o'clock, whatever, and go to it. If that was your dentist appointment, if it was your hair appointment, you would go to it. Don't, this is an appointment for you. You need to, see that as bettering yourself. And if this is important, you're going to make it happen. If you don't, if you say it's important, but then you don't stick to it, then there's a disconnect, and you need to figure out what you want to do then. So I mean, it's a day in, day out. And we're talking about food earlier, and a lot of people say, oh, the working out, that's got to be tough. And I'm like, working out, 1.5 hours a day, 2 hours maybe, that's the easy part. It's the other 22 hours of the day that you're at home, you've got a meal prep, or you've got food that's there and you can't eat it. That's the hard part.
What were your friends and family's reaction like when you announced them, like, "Hey, I want to give bodybuilding a try"?
It was I mean, of course, they were pretty supportive. I mean, it was all new to them, especially like my parents, and I have a sister who lives in Pittsburgh, and so they were supportive from the early years. Just kind of asking a lot of questions, because obviously I'm the only one in the family who does this, and they're like, where did you come up with, they're I'd say, kind of more impressed with just my drive. They're like, I don't know where, you get this, not that they've been successful too, but have never really gone down, this path. I'm kind of, so, it's, the one thing I would say that they, sometimes they're like, well, don't you think you're being obsessive about it? I'm like, well, you kind of have to be. I mean, it's like, you want to achieve that goal. I'm sorry, I can't eat that cake, or I can't eat all of those, sweet potatoes and cheesy potatoes and all of that good stuff, because I've got a goal, and, I just can't. They're like, just one day. I'm like, depending on, when my show is, I'm like, no. So
And how did you deal with, holidays and everything like that, like you said, like with the food? Because like for me, like the Super Bowl and everything like that, I ate probably like 8,000 calories. I'm not gonna lie. But like, how do you deal with those holidays? Because that can be an special annoyance for so many people.
right, right. So I will either, I mean, honestly, I will either like eat right before I go so that I'm not hungry, or I will take my own food, or I will pick and choose. I mean, there are smart choices. I mean, turkey is good, depending, obviously if you're talking about Thanksgiving, Christmas, those kinds of things. You know, yeah, Super Bowl parties and those types of things, I'm like, okay, I can do veggies, specific ones. Usually there's always a raw veggie plate that someone brings. You got to kind of avoid the dips, but everyone loves the dip. But it's just, you know, it is a little bit of self control, and like I said, hey, if you have a little bite or if you enjoy it, let yourself have it. But it's not going to be the end of the world. You just gotta, the next day, you know, maybe work a little bit harder, or it just get back on the the bandwagon, and okay, I'm tracking, and I'll be right back on it.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, so many people after that one misstep, they just completely spiral out of control, and it's like, just realize, yeah, you're human, you're gonna make mistakes, and just get right back on it. But I also have to talk genetics on this podcast because, I mean, everyone's on social media, and I hear this all the time. Oh my god, I want his arms, I want her abs, I want their back, and it's just want to strangle them because they don't understand that, like, you can train just like someone, you can eat just like them, you're not going to get the same results, unfortunately. But whenever someone first gets started working out, they always have that one body part that really really takes off, that they don't have to train as much, and then they have that one body part that they can just, you know train to oblivion, and it's not even going to catch up. What was one
Right.
body part that really took off for you and one body part that just dragged behind?
Shoulders is typically my one body part that I get like, I'm kind of off season now, so I don't really have it. But your I get like the striations. Like the one year I competed. I mean, my competition was like 3 months out, and I already had them. I mean, it was just like they just came in. And then I'd say the one area for me that is the hardest is kind of like the glutes. I mean, and it's just something that I got to start training more of, and it's a slower process for me, and even looking at pictures from my competitions, and knowing where I have to make improvements. That's just kind of like my glute and hamstring tie in that area.
Yeah, the moment you mentioned your height, I would have probably bet my entire life savings that yeah, it would probably be legs because that's the same thing for me where it's I could inject pure muscle into my legs and they wouldn't even grow.
Right.
It's just the never-ending struggle for me, but I mean, the one thing that isn't talked about a lot, I mean, it's talked about a little bit though, is the nutrition side of this sport, like we talked about before. What were some of the bigger nutritional changes that you made when you really started to take things seriously?
So uh, in 2012, when I first competed, I worked with a coach who he gave me the standard, or he gave me a I ate the same thing every day for a couple weeks at a time. I'm sure it was, whether it was chicken, he mapped it out for me exactly what I was supposed to eat, and it was no variation. And then next couple weeks would be the same thing. I eat this for breakfast, midday, lunch, dinner, everything. Which some people like that, and sometimes I would like to go back to that because you just don't think, you just eat, based on that schedule. But it does get boring. And then since 2013, my coach that I've been working with, Adam Adkinson, we do macros. And so it's a little bit more flexible, meaning, I have a certain number of carbs, certain number of proteins and fats in a day that I can eat. And I track on my phone on, my fitness pal. And, the goal is to stay within your macros, but it does give you the flexibility to kind of pick and choose what you like. Which last night I have a 17-year-old daughter. I made a HelloFresh meal. I'm not, a big fancy cooker, obviously, because I eat a lot of bland things. But I made this for my daughter and I, and it's in my Fitness Pal, and yeah, it took up a huge chunk of my like fats and carbs, but I was able to make it work. So I mean, there are things, and right now I'm off season, so I'm not as scrutinized on my carbs and fats. So, but so now I like the macros because it gives you that flexibility of kind of picking and choosing. Although I will say that you do find that there are still things that I eat. Like my breakfast is the same regardless. It's like I like my egg whites, I like my cream of wheat.
How do you deal with some of the cravings that you might get though? Because that's the one thing for me that really derails any time I try to go on like a smooth diet for after about a week or two.
Hmm. Yeah, I will. I mean, because chocolate for me is if I have a little bit of chocolate, like then I want more of it. So I will have kind of like what I call like my smart chocolate sources. Like I'll have like chocolate rice cakes, or else I'll have rice cake with peanut butter that's like kind of got chocolate in it. It gives me that flavor. So I just try, I try to pick healthier alternatives, to that. I mean, we do have that in our house. I mean, we have a lot of carbs, we have a lot of cookies, and things like that that my other family members, they enjoy. So it's not that I don't have those things around. It has gotten easier being in this sport, to not crave those things. And again, and it if I do let myself have a little treat every now and then, I find that I have to like really you know, pull myself back harder in the next 2 days, because otherwise I'll just keep craving it, like you said.
Yeah, I mean it's a slippery slope, especially when it comes to
Yeah.
that. So yeah, I mean, I just give up. I mean, I don't have that bodybuilder spirit, where you gotta push through and all that. But I mean, another side of this sport that is not. I mean, it's the hardest thing that you can do in this sport, and it's the posing. And I mean, it's harder than a lot of people's nutrition. It's harder than your working out. What has your experience with posing been like?
So I've primarily worked with my coach with doing posing. I've also seen another gentleman here in the Columbus area, Mike Davies, who he has posing clinics at his gym. So I've gone up there to work with him. I have tried doing online posing, like with people. Was not real pleased with that. It was, difficult for me scheduling time because she was in a different time zone and kind of all that craziness. And
You're gonna talk to me about time zones and how the difficulty they can be. I've had Australians on, and that's just a
oh
cluster
my
waiting to
goodness,
happen.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then just the whole like, positioning, and I'm standing at the back of the room. Can you see me? And then you're kind of coming up close to watch what she's doing. It's just logistically not doesn't work well, at least not for me. And I mean, that I was just like, I tried that because she was a pro, and I thought that that would, be the right way to go. And I just was not very conducive to, what I felt was going to be productive. So I was like, okay. So then I'm like, I'll just stay local. So I mean, but it is something that I will say probably I need to practice more of. It is because you can have the greatest physique in whatever division you're in, bikini, figure, women's physique, even bodybuilding. But if you don't showcase that in a way that presents your best self, I mean, you're going to cost yourself positions, definitely, placings. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And out of your physique poses, what is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
My favorite pose, which some people call like my money pose, because when I got my pro card, it was like the best shot. Is like side chest, and then my least favorite, I would say, is back double by, only because it's showing my weakest area, and sometimes I don't. My arms kind of get a little pinched, and I have to kind of like pull my back so I don't have like kind of like so wrinkles kind of like in the muscle showing. So it's just my weakest pose.
Well, at least with that one though, you can put your smile down and you don't have to like have that smile up because at
Yes.
at least there's that. But I mean,
But
this like
what's really cool? What's really cool about that one is at some shows they have a big screen like up on that stage. And so you can actually like see yourself, and you can also kind of like self correct. So I'm kind of like, you're looking at yourself up there and you're like, okay, this is what I need to do.
and I mean, I'm shocked because you're the third straight guest that hasn't said abs and thighs is their least favorite because that by far was like if I were to do a poll, it's 95% of all the answers that I've gotten is that one where it almost got to a point where I just stopped asking that as a question because I just assumed that that's what it was. But hey, I like the variety and I like that just because that's just such an awkward pose and it's hard to make it look like flowy with everything else. But
It is, yeah.
were you always wanting to be a physique competitor, or was it something that you sort of grew into? Because a lot of the guests that I have on that do the top two divisions, bodybuilding or physique, they start out as something else and then they just got too big for it. Or were you just one of those that where you always wanted to do just physique?
Honestly, it was because when I started, was back in 2012 was when I first competed. Women's physique, because of Daniel and Bailey, kind of had start, first made the big, and you know, I was a big fan of her, still I am, but I liked I when I started working out with my trainer, and then I saw and then the coach too, we were kind of like assessed whether it was going to be physique or figure. And just based on kind of what I already had, he felt that, physique would have been a better fit, which I'm very happy with because I do like to. I'm not a cardio person. I mean, most physique and bodybuilding people aren't, of course, but um, I like lifting heavy, and then I like also being more muscular and more toned. So, but nowadays though, it's hard to tell even physique and figure girls apart. I mean, so especially at the pro level, I mean, they're phenomenal looking.
I mean, people who are into cardio, I always consider that a mental disease that needs to be treated, and it's something we'll talk about cardio in a bit because that by far is my least favorite thing. But when you're walking on that stage, what is that feeling like for you? Knowing that, I mean, you've worked your butt off, you've gone through preps, which I mean, let's be honest, preps are not the most fun thing on the planet. Just those
Right.
months upon months of hard work, and you're finally able to go on stage and show it off. What is that feeling like for you?
It's sometimes I have to pinch myself, honestly, because it's like I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't, and it's not that I'm like why am I doing this? It's kind of more like it's almost like a dream. I mean, it's just that it's because you have looked forward to that moment for so long, and regardless of how well you stack up against everybody that's out there, you still feel it's still an exhilarating feeling for me. I mean, it's like, you know what, you've earned your this place on stage, you've put in the time, you've, earned your pro card, you know, there's going to be a first place and there's always going to be a last place, where and so, but it's a phenomenal feeling. And at first you do get those, of course, stage butterflies and a thing like that. But I'm telling you, once you walk on stage, it other than a little jitteriness, don't get me wrong. I mean, when you're doing your poses and you're a little depleted anyhow, and you've got the shakes, and then you got the nerves, and you're trying to hold those, and everything's tightening up. I mean, it is a little bit shaky, but it quickly dissipates because you're like, okay, kind of game on, face on, and but underneath it all, it's still very just an exhilarating feeling.
And when you won your pro card, what was that moment like for you when they called your name and you realized, oh my God, I'm a pro now?
You know, it was very surreal because it was something that, and I will say I was very fortunate. At the novice or at the amateur level, they do a lot. It's a lot of it is based on height. So the tall classes usually have fewer women in them. And so that I will say that being tall kind of helped me to earn my pro card in that respect. Again, it's all in who shows up and how you look compared to them.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just, you're finally able to go and compete in pro shows and everything. And for a lot of my guests that I have on, I mean, that's the one highlight of their career is, winning their pro card just because that's just the affirmation that so many people are looking for. But post show blues are one thing that are not discussed as well. And I love to talk about it because a lot of people do not understand that that look that you present on stage is not going to be sustainable 365 days a year. Unfortunately, I should say. But I mean, yeah, it is, you're not going to be able to look like that all the time. And what was that like when you first learned that? And has it gotten easier for you to accept that as your career in this sport has gone on?
Yeah, there is definitely that kind of, you want to maintain that because you like, I mean, you want to maintain the look, because at least for me, I mean, I like that kind of very lean, shreddy look. But yeah, from a health perspective, and if you truly want to make gains for a future show, and I'm not saying just a show in like 2 weeks because you ain't gonna do anything in 2 weeks, but I'm talking about like if you're truly going into an off season and you've got to put on, good weight, healthy weight. You can't let yourself, go to the extreme. Um, but it is a little bit of a mind game with you. It kind of screws with you a little bit because you are on that high of feeling and looking so good, and then you're like, I'm fluffy now. But again, I'm especially because I this so for 2022, gosh, I made the decision that I'm not going to compete until 2023. I just based on my two shows that I did, I'm like, okay, I need to take some time and really work on those areas, because I want to come back more competitive in 2023. So I need to have this longer off season to really put in that time. I'm okay with that because I know in terms of, putting on that little bit extra weight and that's necessary during this time frame.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's great that a lot of people do that too. And I mean, I highly recommend it because a lot of those people, yeah, they just get torn apart after going year for year just
Hmm.
without breaks. And then your body just, yeah, is not in the best, condition for it. But I've always said too, I mean, it's like, just like starting your own business, you got to spend money to make money. You got to put on weight if you want to put on muscle. Unfortunately,
Yep.
those two, do go hand in hand. But I mean, let's be completely honest. You're not the average looking woman when it comes to, this look that you have. And when you walk out in public, a lot of times, especially during the summertime, I can imagine, I sort of like to compare it to being like a mini celebrity where it's like you're gonna draw people's attention. Like it's just human nature, sort of when they see something that's not the normal, just be like, oh wow, that's interesting. What has that
Right.
reaction been like for you? And is it gotten easier for you to accept that, as you've put more and more years in the sport, or is it still kind of weird at times to you, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it is, kind of it is very weird. I mean, because I don't see myself like that, right? I think it's that, and there was an instance that really comes to mind last. spring, might have been summer, I don't know, was at the salon getting my nails done, and I was walking up to the sink to wash my hands, and I heard a gal who was sitting at, getting her toes done say to her friend, "Look at her arms," and I was just like, at first you're like, is that a good compliment or is that a bad? Because some people, don't really like that look for women, but I take it to be, and then I also get very, I mean, again, random people kind of, whether I'm at, TJ Maxx shopping or wherever I'm at, they're like, oh, those are arms, those are goals, they're like, so it makes me feel good, and I know that, to be honest, I think that sadly, there's, in our population, and especially those that compete, that's a smaller and smaller number, in terms that have that, and so whether it's, and I have a teacher friend of mine who she's like, man, you're a badass, da, da, da," she just thinks, that, and I'm like, again, I don't see myself that way, but if people, use me or kind of look to me as kind of a model or what, that's great, because I hope, I don't want to, I'm not bragging to, you know, boast myself or anything like that. But if, people need some kind of inspiration, and they see that I can do it, I mean, I'm almost 50 years old, and I feel like I look better now than I did when I was in my 20s.
Well, you said you started working out when you were younger too. What has been some of the biggest differences as you've gotten older when it comes to working out? Because I'm 27, so I can still get away with a lot of stuff that I couldn't when I become your age. Hopefully, I make it to that age. We'll see. But when it comes to that, like, what are some of the biggest changes that you've probably seen as opposed to like stuff that you could get away with back then that like now you just can't?
Um, Longer leg recovery days. It's like, especially when you put, you push yourself and you're just like, you know, 3 days later, you're still feeling it, maybe 4 days, so
I'm gonna quit lifting then by the time I turn 40. Then I'm not dealing with that crap. Are you kidding me?
I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, and I think too now, I mean, whereas I used to feel that, gosh, I have to spend like 3 hours at the gym, I've gotten smarter about how I train and really, use, as long as you're not on your phone or doing dilly dallying, doing other things, really making the most of that hour, hour and a half that you're at the gym and get out, get in, get out, because you do need to have some type of a, you know, I don't know, balance, if you will. I mean, it does consume your life. It really does. I mean, between, I have a full time job, and really work bodybuilding and this lifestyle is, almost a full time job in and of itself. I mean, with the meal prep and the training and everything like that. So, um, it's, but yet I still, like I said, it's important to have that, try to have a little bit of balance through things. So, recovery time is important. I do find that I really make it a point to get more sleep now. I've learned, and there's obviously been more, I guess education about the importance of sleep. And so, I typically go to bed between 10 and 10:30. I do get up 5:30, so I'm getting, 7 hours of sleep, typically a night, and so.
Well, and I mean, you are a mom too, so that's like 4 jobs that you have basically. What is your time management like? Because even having 2 of those things, I would drive myself probably crazy.
Oh goodness, yeah, and she's 17 now, so luckily she can drive herself, and and she has her own part-time job and all of that good stuff. So I'm very pleased that she's very self-sufficient. Younger ones, yeah, it is more challenging, definitely. I was the mom that always took her to the gym with me as long as my gym had a play area, because I felt, and I still feel that, as a mom, I will be a better mom if I have mommy time, right? I mean, it's like I need, I always told her, I'm like, how you have play dates? Well, this is like mommy's play date, I mean, I just need that time to myself. And there were some times when, she didn't want to go. It wasn't, she just wanted to stay home. And but yeah, and then whether it's time with your, husband or other family, and it's important though that they're supportive, because then you communicate that it's important to you and that they help support you in your goals, and not, because it can be at times. unbalanced, very unbalanced, especially when it gets closer to showtime when you're doing, you know, 2 hours of cardio because you do need to lean down. I mean, and not that, and it's just because you're kind of under the wire, and and you're doing more posing, and it's just kind of like all of those things. So it ebbs and flows, and I think that that's where having, like I said, a supportive family and friend system, is definitely important.
Does your family know to sort of stay away from you like the last week before your show and be like, just stay away from her, don't try to upset her or do anything like that? Have they gotten that message like you like finally after all these years?
Right, exactly. Or and really from a food perspective, yeah, your calories are low and everything that last week, so you can get a little bit hangry. From a training perspective, that last week isn't too bad. It actually, you're resting your muscles and you're doing very light workout, so it's not too bad. But yeah, from a, and you're kind of at the point where I'm just tired of dieting.
Which I would have been that devil kid that like orders Papa John's and just sets it outside of your room and just being like, doesn't that smell good and delicious and stuff? But hey, so there's lucky that wasn't the case. But I mean, I promise we talk about it, and I hate it more than life itself. It's cardio, and when I say cardio, I mean actual running. I can walk for forever, and I do like to go on walks, especially during the summer when because I live I live like half a mile away from a nature trail, so I go there usually. I try to go every night during the summer and walk for like an hour on that. But what is your relationship like with cardio? Because unfortunately, when you become a bodybuilder, you sort of have to sign a deal with the devil when it comes to cardio.
Yes, yes. So we have a treadmill here. I mean, that's kind of like if I need steady state cardio, I will do that for however long I need to. But the other big piece of cardio that I do is actually I'm a member of Orange Theory Fitness, and so as I get bored to death with just running on a treadmill, or I'm not a runner. Period. I mean, you might get a minute out of me, and that's it. But I, and to vary it and to kind of, like I said, I need someone to kind of push me to kind of like, do different things. And so, gosh, I think I've been a member now for like 6 years. So, sometimes I'll go like 5 days a week and I'll go to like the 5:30 class. I like to get up early in the morning, get it done, and then I actually hit the gym after work. So I work kind of like 8:30 to 5:30, and then I'll hit the gym afterwards. So I'm usually doing like 2 days, but it helps. Right now I'm working remote, so I'm working from home, and so it helps me, to get out of the house early in the morning. And I really like that version of cardio because it's not it changes up. You're on the treadmill, you're walking, and I'm a power walker. Like I said, I don't jog or I don't run on the treadmill whatsoever. But I will power walk. So with the inclines, and then you've got rowing, and then you've got weight. They've also got weights there too, and so you kind of rotate, and that for me gives me a really good workout. So much more so than just going to the gym and being on the elliptical for 45 minutes.
I just couldn't get over the fact that you work online now because like I hate those people more than life. Because like my little brother, he has a job online. He gets like an hour done, and he just sits there for like 8 hours though, and he'll just be like watching a movie while he's working. So like, he's like,
Oh
oh
no.
yeah, I got to go
I'm
to the warehouse and stuff like
yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah, I know, but I mean, it's just it's
Oh, but
so much more convenient.
I will say though, before all of this, that I think that I mean, that was a common, misconception that a lot of people had, that that's what remote people did. But now that I am working from home, I mean, I tend to put in more time because you know what? The office is right here. And so it's like, oh, I got this project I need to do. So it's like, you'll just kind of like, it might be 10 o'clock at night and you find yourself working because, you need to get done.
Whereas I'm the person where like you would literally, if you were my boss, you would have to literally come to my house and make me literally do this stuff. So yeah, but yeah, I will continue to believe that until the day that I die. Then the people from, but yeah, I have heard some stories like that too, where it's like yeah, people have realized that yeah, working from home isn't all it's cracked up to be. But I've always had the belief that any job that you can do in your pajamas, it's not that hard. But but no,
There
but
are those perks. Yes,
yeah, there
definitely
are
those
there are there
perks.
are perks to that. Like yeah, literally, and not yeah, not having a dirty men's room too is another perk then that I guess that is alluded it. But hey, I won't get too much into all that. But I mean, just with this lifestyle too, what would you say is probably the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself since becoming a bodybuilder?
Surprising thing I learned about myself.
I mean, I could say you're a glutton for punishment, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah,
But
I mean, really, I mean, that I'm even just doing this. I mean, really, that I'm even, that I'm whether, like, sometimes I'm in prep for like 20 weeks, and you're counting down, and, at first it seems like it's so far away, and you're like, and your body's not going through, you're not seeing the rapid changes. I mean, you talked about, wanting those instant changes, and you're like, I'm not, but you kind of have to, and I know it's cliche, but they say, trust the process. And that's why you have a coach or you have a trainer to kind of help. They've done this multiple times, and you know everybody's different. Their body, reacts differently to different workouts and over time. And so I think, just like, because even when I was at the gym in high school, I would have never thought that I would have been, or even when I was at college at Ohio State, I went to the Arnold Classic, back when it was kind of like the early days, um, that I would be, like one of those, possibly a competitor on, the Arnold stage. I mean, I admired them and I thought they looked awesome, but to now be like, wow, I mean, I'm a pro just like they are. I'm not the caliber that they are yet, but I mean, just to realize that, here I am.
Are you as Ohioans sort of aware how spoiled you are when it comes to just the bodybuilding community? Because not every state has that type of a community.
Yeah, we probably don't recognize that. We probably just take it for granted, because especially being here in Columbus. I mean, I'm kind of bummed next, it's coming up here in a few weeks that I can't go. I've got family obligation that's taking me out of town, but um and like I said, maybe, and that's probably why, I'm like, oh, it'll be there next year, and and it's changed a lot through the years, but I mean, it is still a very awesome experience and walk. I mean, although you do realize that Arnold's not all that tall, on TV he looks so much taller, and
Well, isn't he like 6 feet, or has he shrunk as he's gotten older?
yeah, yeah, and he, okay, because I'm 5'11". I mean, he might have been about my height, I mean, I wasn't like, forehead to forehead with him, but, I was expecting him to be taller. I mean, it's just the way, he's always kind of portrayed in his movies
I
and
mean, the
shows.
man is almost like 80 years old too, so we can kind of give that to him. I mean, that's an excuse, I guess, that he can
Right,
use.
right.
But yeah, he filmed a movie up here, Jingle All the Way. He filmed it like
Oh,
literally.
yes.
He filmed it like 10 minutes from where I live, basically. So that's the only,
Nice.
other than that. But like I said, there's no Minneapolis or St. Paul pro, so we don't really have it, especially in the Midwest. There's not that much really here, so that's why it's like whenever I have a guest from Ohio, I was like, oh, those spoiled pricks. They if
Right.
only they
Yes.
knew,
Yeah.
how lucky they have it. But that's great. And if someone were to walk up to you and say, Allison, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you'd like to see changed?
Oh, I actually had to think about it, but then now I was like, and I don't know, we see this too much at the pro level, but I don't agree with crossovers. I don't believe that if you are competing in figure, that you should be able to, in the same show, cross over and compete in physique. I just think that it's two different looks. I mean, there's been women who have won both. I mean, or like, I'm competing in physique. She beat me when she did bodybuilding and physique. So I mean, and I was like, how is that? I mean, that to me, just, I'm like, there's different looks for a reason, and I don't think that people should be able to cross over.
Oh, I agree with you when it comes to like winning more divisions, but like if you get last in bodybuilding and then you win physique still, it's like, yeah, then maybe. But like those people that win, like you said, they win both those categories. I was like, that should not even be a thing. Like that should
Yes.
not, like if you win physique and you win in figure, you shouldn't have won in physique or you shouldn't have won in figure. I
Right.
mean,
Exactly.
yeah, I've heard stories of like that too. And I was like, okay, maybe unless you're going up against like a goat or something like that on stage, then, maybe, but
Yeah.
like it's,
Right. Of the two, you
yeah.
were the best, regardless of the class that it was.
I mean, I did have someone that won their pro card because they were literally the only person that showed up to the show, and I was like, well, then I could have gotten my pro card too. So I was thinking maybe one of these days I might just do that, just so that I can say that I'm a pro bodybuilder myself. Just find the one show where I'm going to be the only person there and then win it. But hey, maybe that'll be a thing. But that to me is ridiculous. For me, you got to have at least like a handful of people to compete before you can give out anything. But There are some things with that, but for me too, it'd be like the pay too. Like my whole thing is like, if you're a pro in this sport, you should not have to work like a 9 to 5 job. Like that should be just your thing where they should support you and you should like through
I would love
sponsorships and
that.
through everything
No,
else.
yeah,
No other guest has ever denied that either, so but like that's my thing too, is that like, yeah, if you do this like and you're a pro and you're representing the sport, like yeah, you should be able, and I don't even care if it's like just a little bit of money too, like just to be able to make it so that like you can be able to just focus on your training and maybe get a side gig if you want to or something like that. But like
right.
yeah, like literally you have to be like one of the top 3 in the Olympia to basically have to be able to do this just as a full-time job, really. And that's, there's only a couple of only one Andrea Shaw, really. So it's like, that's not, it's not gonna, which by the way, I had her on like 2 years ago and I'm gonna have her on again recently. And you talk about someone taking up the whole damn screen, where I was telling her, I was like, I might need to get a whole new damn camera because you're taking up the whole screen. But yeah, so that would be a thing for me. And also like the judging too, where it's like, there's going to be human error because it's a sport,
Yes, yes.
I cannot tell you how
Safety
many
is
times.
objective.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how many times I told the catcher behind the plate because I was a pitcher, just move out of the way on this one and let it hit the umpire basically behind you. So but that's it's
Yeah,
just
that is, there is that subjectivity. And I think too, I mean, especially when you get to the pro level, when you're looking at like the top one, two, and three, I mean, you're like, how can you, I mean, there's got to be such minute, minuscule differences between them. And it might be that, well, her quads are this much bigger. And
they'll come up with the most minute thing that pisses me off too. They'll be like, "Oh, that one thing in her forearm was kind of off a little bit," or like, "Oh yeah, that her calf," or especially with the guys too, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, his calf was split a little funny," or something like that. They get so down pat and so minute about this sport, where it's just like, yeah, because I look at that too. Like any of the bodybuilding shows, men and female, I look at it and I'm just like, there's some people that like you can tell they should win just because they look so much better. But once you get to
yeah,
that top level
yes,
where they're just like, how can you really tell the difference? I just
right,
don't.
exactly.
And especially with the height thing too, because like I'm sorry, if you're competing like you said at those shows where some of the guests are like a foot shorter than you, you should not have to be on the same stage as them, because it should not be where you have to judge someone, because when your body is that different, I mean,
Yeah,
it's just that's just not to me. It's not fair, especially to the taller person, but it's also not fair to the shorter person too, because
right.
so there should be different categories with that, where it's like
Yeah.
but
And yeah, that's the other thing too, is like at the pro level, I would like for them to have height classes. I mean, I think that if that's kind of, I don't want to say the way we got in, but I mean, that definitely has an impact because honestly, I'm contemplating, I mean, being 5'11", I was definitely in all, the two competitions I did last year. I mean, I was the tallest by inches.
oh,
I
I've only had like, out of my like 400 female guests I've had on, I think like 10 of them have been like as tall as you, really. So it's very very rare.
Yes, but it is a disadvantage, so I'm contemplating going to figure next year. I don't know yet. We'll kind of see what progress I make, but I mean, I can't change the fact that I'm tall. I mean, my muscles are, going to be as long as they are, and I can only, you know, build them so much.
You could take a sledgehammer to your shins. That's easy. That's an easy fix right there. Gain you like 3 less inches or something like that. That's an
There you
easy
go, just
procedure. Yeah.
hobble out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I am contemplate because because being shorter, you're just more compact. And I'm like, so I'm thinking about it. I'm not too keen on it. I mean, there's pros and cons with, figure you wouldn't have to do a 60-second routine like you do in physique.
But you got to wear those heels.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. That's the con, which only adds to my height, right? I mean,
Yeah, we don't
you
want
want to
you.
call
We
them
don't want
heels,
you
they're
at my.
super
We
shoes.
don't want you at 6'3" my height on that stage. That's just not going to look. That's going to be off. Like I had a figure competitor on who was 6'5" in the heels because she was 6'2" normally, and then it's
Yes,
like,
yes,
why? It's like, yeah. So
right. Exactly. Yeah. So that is the downside. So
I've
yeah.
always told them, if you want to break the internet, just have the male bodybuilders walk on stage in those high heels and see how they would do.
There you go. Yes.
That would make everyone's day. But I mean, when we do talk to you a year from now, because I'd love to have you on in a year just discuss what you've been up to. Where would you like to be at just in your bodybuilding? Where would you like to be at just in your overall life? Because I know you said you're taking the year off, but where would you just like to be at? Just physique wise, just your body wise, like next year when we have you on.
Um, gosh. Well, working on kind of legs in my back. That's kind of where we're, even for figure, and that was feedback I got from being in physique as well. I need to kind of like broaden, obviously some, as much as I can kind of to make my, have more of that tapered look. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on this year. And then also kind of like, you know, to add to that, kind of even adding because you can have your V, but then you kind of want to, have a little bit more size on your legs too. And that is true again with whether it's physique or figure. So and then so I do plan to, like I said, compete in 2023 and hopefully like more in the spring. So there I could be, 3 months out for my first, competition, after a full almost year and a half off. So definitely more, you know, fully developed and I won't be as lean as I will be in a year, but I mean, leading up to that competition, because I just, while I learned a lot in those first two shows and it was, like I said, somewhat humbling, I just want to be more competitive, and I go in there and, I not just place, but to, place well, and again, I'm not one of those ones who's like, I'm going to win, I'm kind of a more realistic person, but, you also got to have that vision of what you want to look like. And if you're looking at the women who are placing first, second, and third as kind of that, that's a goal. I know they say don't compare yourself to other people. Well, you have to have some kind of, you know, mental image of kind of like what they're looking for because obviously they're winning. That's what's looking for. That's what the judges are looking for.
Well, and I mean, the secret to getting a great back is you take about a month's worth of food. You can fit in a backpack if you get it like all scrunched up into cans. You drop yourself in the middle of the ocean in just a kayak. By the time you reach shore, you will have an insane back, regardless. You might run out of food before that happens, but hey, that's what I did in the summer. Really, is that I would go up to a bunch of lakes and just go kayaking. That was like my back thing because the back was the one thing that really took off for me too. And working in warehouses like all throughout college, where you were lifting and loading packages
Yeah,
for
definitely.
4 hours a day, that's gonna do it. But yeah, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, thank you to, my coach, Adam Adkinson, been working with him for years. He's with See You Later Leaner here in Columbus, but he has clients online as well. Flex Fitness is the gym that I work out here. Steve Spalding owns that, and it's a old school type of gym. Love it there. I used to go to one of the, commercial gyms, but it just kind of got crazy with people who aren't very serious about working out, and I just needed a different mindset. So very happy to have joined his gym. And then also, I'm a sponsored athlete for Gifted Genetic Labs. So check them out on their website. They've got great supplements, great vitamins, apparel, a lot of different products. So, and they're actually coming out with a meal plan as well. So
Well, I'll leave a link to all that stuff down there below, and also a link to her Instagram page where everyone go and check out Allison. Again, you will get inspired to get off that couch and stop eating all those Twinkies and get in shape. But again, Allison, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey with us. It was an absolute delight to talk to you, and I can't wait to have you on again where we just talk about your future plans.
absolutely would love that. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And again, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing off. Have a great day, everyone.